year is 1986. With the release of The Legend of Zelda earlier that year and Super Mario Bros. The previous year, among other things, Nintendo set out to make a sci-fi adventure-based game. They took the words Metro as in Metro Station and Android and created the name Metroid and crafted the game around the premise of being able to turn around in Mario. Being inspired by Alien, and including what was at the time a big plot twist of Samus actually being a woman, the game would go on to be a commercial and critical success, shipping 2.73 million units worldwide. With the release of Metroid 2, Super Metroid, and Metroid Fusion, one of the devs suggested putting Super Metroid on the Game Boy Advance, but Sakamoto chose the original Metroid instead. I mean, it makes sense. Super Metroid has aged just a bit better than the original has. Being able to crouch and aim diagonally probably helped it age a little better, and of course having an actual map probably helped it stand the test of time a bit better too. So with that in mind, Sakamoto set out to retell Samus' original story by taking advantage of the Metroid Fusion engine, and the product would be known as Metroid Zero Mission. It officially released 16 years ago today, but the question is, how does it stack up to the original as well as the ones that came after it? The fact that you're watching this video right now suggests you really want to know the answers, so let's get to it as I review Metroid Zero Mission for the Game Boy Advance. Although it's based on the Metroid Fusion engine, it was modified a tad bit and it shows. If you compare it to Super Metroid or Metroid Fusion, Samus seems to move slightly faster. You can tell the game is faster paced than previous entries. Maybe Samus is really choosing that speed booster for all it's worth. As is standard fare in Metroidvania games, exploration is heavily encouraged and your only hurdles are obstacles that you need to acquire certain items to navigate through. Now, obviously all the original game's upgrades are present and accounted for. You've got the Morph Ball bombs, missiles, various suit, high jump boots, ice beam, and screw attack. Naturally, what with it being a remake and all, it also has a lot of stuff not in the original game. You end up acquiring the gravity suit, space jump, power bomb, speed booster, super missiles, plasma beam, wave beam, charge beam, the whole shebang. It also reintroduces the long beam from the original game, something we can safely assume Samus has in most of the other games since her beams don't stop after a couple of feet, but they're looking to stay true to the original, so Samus gotta get it to shoot fire in here. There's also a pretty unique item specifically for this game, the power grip. Not to be confused with the power glove. Well, kinda. It's basically there to provide an explanation for the ledge grabbing introduced in Fusion. I guess Samus needs a power-up for her to know how to grab onto things. Maybe it's a claw for her arm cannon or something. But you also get new items. There's also more enemies to try out the new gear on, and even existing enemies can act slightly more aggressive than you remember. Ridley and Kraid in particular act more like they do in Super Metroid. Space pirates join the party after the original part of the story, and there's a few new bosses for you to deal with. It isn't exactly more harder than the original though, far from it, because Samus feels a lot more flexible in her movements, so it more than balances out, in addition to the extra gear. For instance, Metroids still take 5 shots to obliterate after you freeze them, but now you've got the super missile and can take them out in one shot. I've noticed the wave beam and plasma beam acting more like their Super Metroid and Fusion counterparts, stacking and allowing you to pierce through walls and enemy gray matter respectively. And it's also, as always, pretty satisfying having the screw attack and space jump just flying around ripping enemies into confetti. Interestingly though, you can't use the plasma beam, space jump, or gravity suit right away. The suit's operating system is apparently out of date and can't recognize them, although you're still required to get them to shoot through blocks specifically associated with them. That sort of makes sense with the plasma beam, but the space jump and gravity suit have their own blocks too, which doesn't make any sense to me. It's like the blocks somehow sense you have the upgrades or something. Now I say required with massive quotation marks because you can always sequence break. Unlike Metroid Fusion, which held you to a straight path and went out of its way to make sequence breaking pretty much impossible, Zero Mission practically bends over backwards to inject destructible blocks in the right place to make it easier to sequence break. I'm not sure how I feel about Nintendo injecting blocks around to make something as meta as sequence breaking easier, but sure, at least it's better than actively trying to stop people from doing it. One neat little twist is that after killing Mother Brain and returning to your ship, it's shot down and apparently your stuff along with it. This actually shifts the tone from action-adventure Metroidvania into surprisingly tense stealth action where you're only left with a pistol that when charged up can stun space pirates for a couple of seconds but can't actually hurt them. Naturally, you can't rely on it for crap, so you should probably just stay hidden. Thankfully, the game will inject areas for you to hide in until the heat dies down, and the pirates will quickly forget about you if they don't see you for 3 seconds. My only guess is they're like Doug from the movie Up and are easily distracted by whatever they— Squirrel! The pretty cool thing, though, is that being so defenseless really makes it feel good getting your stuff back. You have to go through a Chozo trial with a ghost and have to shoot its symbol, not yourself, a few times to prove worthy. That all-too-familiar Brinstar theme starts blazing and you're suddenly ripping through pirates like they're made out of tissue paper. Of course, you still shouldn't get too cocky, though, since they don't drop health pickups and those elites are still pretty friggin' tough if you happen to run into one. Now, if there's one gripe I have in the overall game, it's the introduction of the standing Chozo statues. Most of them are absolutely mandatory to progress in the game since they block your path until you activate them and they sit their stone rears back down. While doing this, they mark your map exactly where you're intended to go, which I'm kind of against. Yeah, the original Metroid was kind of confusing to navigate to, but this seems a little extreme when having a map and even having map stations to reveal the map seems like it would get the job done just fine. I don't feel it's necessary to also hold their hand like that, and if you can use methods to be able to patch your game and remove them, I highly recommend it. And now, they're not too bad, mind you. They don't show you everywhere to go, which is similar to the AI from Metroid Fusion, so it's not a deal breaker, but I'd still rather patch them out. At the very least, they should be optional and not block your path. I like how Metroid Prime's guided node could be disabled if you so choose. One cool thing about the aforementioned patch is that it also restores your ability to turn items on or off like Super Metroid, and it baffles me as to why they never used it officially in a Metroid game since then. A little player choice goes a long way, Nintendo, just saying. All in all, though, the gameplay is very spectacular. The game is just open enough that you can feel free to explore and backtrack as you see fit, really only being limited by your items and or ability to find Nintendo's carefully placed sequence break assistance. The health and limited weapon ammo upgrades scattered everywhere really encourages you to poke around every corner or just use a power bomb to uncover blocks. The items all feel very satisfied to use, and the pacing of the game is very action-orientated, which complements it quite nicely. For the most part, the story is based on the original NES Metroid story. I say mostly because the original version's manual says that Samus Aran is a cybernetically augmented man, which is obviously not true. Since the cat was let out of the bag for a while now, they make no effort to hide Samus being a woman this time around. The story goes that a gang of ne'er-do-wells known as space pirates have been trying to control creatures known as Metroids, who we know in retrospect are made by the Chozo, Samus' parental figures when her parents were killed on a space colony. As she touches down on planet Zebes, Samus Aran sets out to penetrate the space pirate base and destroy Mother Brain, but first she must kill the two known as Kraid and Ridley. In line with the more recent games, Ridley is clearly given a much more dominating role here, despite Kraid also being required for half the equation. That's one thing I've always disagreed with, diminishing Kraid so much. I'm not saying he has to be equal to Ridley, but it would be nice to have him be given some kind of role other than random dinosaur creature you have to shoot down. After disposing of those two and dealing with the various animal population in one form or another, Samus must deal with Mother Brain, although not before dealing with the larval Metroids along the way. Mother Brain herself has received a bit of an upgrade in the form of an eye laser she fires after her tank's been shattered, which is a nice little foreshadowing to the OP Hyper Beam she would have later on in Super Metroid. This doesn't make her too much more imposing, though, and she's down with the expected timer to get out of there. What isn't expected, however, is that the story continues past this point, with Samus getting out of her power suit, I guess believing her job was over, when she's suddenly ambushed by space pirate ships. Maybe Samus should have waited until she was a bit farther away from the planet before leaving herself completely defenseless. I really can't think of a good reason for her to be stripped of her power suit and equipment other than because plot. After stealthing her way through the pirate ship and through the Chozo ruins, she finally reaches what appears to be a very spiritual side of the Chozo people. Samus then gets a pretty vivid memory of what I assume is her 4-year-old self being brought there by her Chozo parents. After going through some kind of spiritual trial to become worthy, she's granted the suit again and all of her abilities, except this time the OS was apparently updated because her 3 previously unknown items become available. After this, as well as acquiring the power bomb, Samus blasts her way through the space pirate ship to defeat what is apparently a mech robot form of Ridley. Either they made that robot as a contingency plan in case anything ever happened to Ridley, or those pirate mofos really work fast. Either way, after beating it, it's all fun and celebrations. Oh wait, no, its eye starts blinking and there's another escape sequence. Some elite space pirates try to get between her and escape, but luckily they're not that bright and Samus makes quick work of them. After making her way to one of the pirate ships, one very brave and stupid pirate actually has the stones to jump in front of the ship as it's taking off. Spoiler alert, it doesn't exactly end well for that pirate. With the pirate ship presumably self-destructed, it's victory at last. Sure, the story may seem a bit simplistic, but it's not like previous Metroid games aside from maybe Fusion were known for having super complex stories anyway. The callback to her childhood was a nice touch, but I kinda wish we could have seen more of that in some form. Guess we'll just have to settle for the manga of dubious canon and the Japanese Fusion ending slide. Seriously, why haven't any of the games taken a serious delving into her childhood? I'm not saying to beat the player over the head with cutscenes, but maybe some logs or something pertaining to her would be nice, or maybe a bonus thing for beating one of the games, just something. I'm going into a bit of a tangent here, but I believe that if a live-action Metroid game was ever made, focusing on our childhood would be the best place to go. Back on the point, the plot's okay all in all. It's probably not going to be winning any awards, but it does get the job well enough and pretty much stays out of the way, which I suppose is good for an action-centric game. Zero Mission is faster paced than the previous game, so it only makes sense that it expedites any plot elements too. While it's based on the Metroid Fusion engine, Zero Mission takes a decidedly more cartoony and stylistic approach to the graphical style than Metroid Fusion and Super do. The designs look more comic book style, and the colors are a lot more vibrant than Metroid Fusion. That's not to say that Fusion was exactly real as brown or anything, but the colors really pop here and the animations feel pretty fluid for a Game Boy Advance game. However, despite this, it's no less detailed in its atmospheric approach than previous games. It mostly just means there's a bit of a sharper contrast in things, and the little cinematics that occur are pretty visually appealing to look at as well. There's a good amount of variety in the music too, both solid remixes of old tracks as well as tracks based on the newer games. You've got tense music, exciting music, more dreadful music, you name it. It even has a different mix of Ridley's theme when you're fighting the mech Ridley, which is pretty nice. My one nitpick is that the title and escape theme have parts of them stripped out for this version, which is a real shame. The sound effects are pretty standard fare, but for some weird reason, Nintendo opted to still give Ridley the freaky scream from Metroid Fusion. Someone over there must really get some kind of pleasure out of making Ridley scream in pain, although at least he doesn't scream whenever he takes damage now, so it's a lot less jarring. With some stylistically comic book-like graphics and beautifully made remixed music that does a good job merging old Metroid with new Metroid, Zero Mission excels from a presentation standpoint. It takes a lighter tone compared to the likes of Fusion or Super and definitely has its own unique charm while taking advantage of the Game Boy Advance. So to answer the question on whether this makes a proper remake to Metroid, my answer is a resounding yes. The overly hand-holding method of the Chozo statues is a minor blemish in the grand scheme of things, and the original Metroid is even available on the cartridge unlocking after you beat the game, so you can even play that to get a direct comparison between the two. If you haven't played it yet and you're a fan of the Metroid series, or even just a fan of Metroidvanias in general, I'd highly suggest giving it a shot. There's a lot of fun to be had, and getting the various types of endings as well as finding all the ways to sequence break can really add to the replayability. It's a great way to start the series if you haven't played it already, especially since it's technically the first chronologically. Thank you for watching my review, and I'll see you next time among the stars.